I did a sort of a deep dive into, the history of slavery in France and the different sort of cities that had ties to it. And I sort of fell upon this New York Times article, which was talking about these 14 slaves who threw themselves off of a ship, choosing death over a lifetime of slavery. And so this was like the article, I think, that I based this entire installation, this work that I made for the show on. In addition to my interest in, myth making, I think a lot of I also have this huge, I think a lot of my work has to do with, textile culture. And more specifically, I'm very fascinated with the masquerade culture in West Africa, and the idea that masquerading is a way for people to express themselves in ways that they wouldn't be able to with their own sort of identity, because your entire identity is concealed. And so you sort of become a new person and can behave in a completely different way. When I was looking at Bordeaux, I discovered this term mascaron, which when I saw what they looked like, I recognized what they were, but I didn't realize that's what they were called. And I was, obviously struck by the name, which is very similar to, mask and masquerade. So I was really interested in finding out a little bit more about this. Apparently, Bordeaux has a significant amount of mascarons in the city, which I thought was very fascinating and very exciting, especially because of what I'm interested in. And what I find was an interesting, I think, comparison was that, with the mascarons, they're of faces. Some of them are, fictional, others non-fictional, like actual people who existed, but they're typically, identifiable as faces, whereas with masquerades, identities are concealed. The whole idea of a masquerade is that nobody's supposed to know who you are. When I looked at the mascarons, I think the first thing that came to my mind was, I need to use my face for this work. I think it made it a little bit more like I was putting myself into the work. And there was this sort of personal connection. And I think I got that idea from seeing the mascarons and seeing, the slave faces and being able to identify that was a Black woman, from the size of her nose. And I think that what I decided to do was I made plaster masks I made plaster casts of my face and sort of just made them repeatedly until I found shapes and I found it in a way that was acceptable to what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was sort of incorporate elements of, the shapes and the crowns and the headdresses that are incorporated into masquerade, like West African masquerade costumes and masks. And also the sort of, the neck area and the crown area that are incorporated into the mascarons in Bordeaux. And I wanted to combine those two ideas to make a set of masks that would be hanging in the exhibition, in a sense, hanging from the ceiling, so that it did have that element of architecture where they were not necessarily on the body, but they are above the audience. And so you could sort of look up to them and it looked like they were looking back down at you. And so there was an element of being able to move through the space and sort of interact with these masks and have them sort of look back at the audience. And I think I wanted to combine, elements of architecture and the interior space in the installation with how masquerades sometimes make people feel uneasy or a little bit uncomfortable, because there's this element of not knowing who is behind the mask or who what the person's intents are.